You're about the most unordinary person I know. You're an elitist. You're an asshole.
No. But see, I'm an out of the closet elitist. I don't run around pretending to be a man of the people. I'm absolutely not a man of the people at all.
How do you pay your bills?
Well, I'm like extraordinarily loaded just from like money I, inherited.
You're a trust fund baby, are you not?
No, completely. I've never needed to work. I mean, it's all just the whole cable news thing. It was like a phase I was going through.
Video, I will document the many connections Tucker Carlson has to the CIA and other groups. The reason I'm doing this is because right now he is leading a major part of America off a cliff with his false conservative platform. He rages about the elite and how America seems to be going down the drain when he himself couldn't be more connected to these same elites helping to do it. He is a total shill, a puppet being used to distribute propaganda. What people need to realize is the left and right paradigm we are given is entirely false. Whether you watch CNN or Fox, you are getting CIA agents highly trained in propaganda, usually coming from wealthy families. Take Anderson Cooper, for example. He admittedly interned at the CIA and was born into the Vanderbilt family. He could be called the face of CNN, just as Tucker is the face of Fox. Follow me as I take you through his career and document his highly suspect rise in journalism. Don't forget to take notes and research these things yourself. Tucker Carlson was born on May 16, 1969, in San Francisco, California. When he was 6 years old, his father Richard divorced his mother Lisa and married Patricia Swanson, one of the heiresses to Swanson Enterprises, most notable for their TV dinners. Carlson attended many boarding schools during his youth, including locations in Switzerland and Rhode Island. He graduated from Trinity College in Connecticut in 1991, which is known as one of the Little Ivies, which are a group of private schools which compete with Ivy League schools. Supposedly, Tucker attempted to join the CIA when he graduated, but his application was denied. I can't find an explanation as to why he wanted to be in the CIA or why they rejected him. His father was a very well-connected man in the media industry and encouraged him to pursue journalism because, quote, they'll take anybody. His father, Richard, started his career in journalism at the young age of 22. He had jobs as a copy boy at the Los Angeles Times, as well as a reporter for United Press International, which at the time was one of the largest newswire services in the world. He worked for a few TV stations in Los Angeles and San Diego before joining San Diego Federal Savings and Loan in 1977. The bank was headed by Gordon Luce, who was the former public affairs director for Reagan. Richard became vice president of finance within 3 years, and during this time the bank had a lot of political controversies due to their connections to current and former members of the Reagan administration. In 1983, he decided to get into politics, and in 1984 ran for mayor of San Diego. He lost to his opponent Roger Hedgecock, who was later forced from office in 1985 after it was revealed he received over $350,000 illegally during his campaign. Coincidentally, he would also go on to become a conservative radio host. In 1986, using his connections to the White House, Reagan personally announced his intention to nominate Richard as Associate Director of the United States Information Agency. He became Director of Voice of America, which was a propaganda broadcasting division of USIA. He served as their longest-running director. Voice of America started in 1941 when President Roosevelt established the Foreign Broadcast Information Service as a program directed by the Office of Strategic Services, which became the CIA. The intention stated publicly was to communicate America's views abroad, but it was really an outfit to disseminate propaganda. The first few broadcasts for Voice of America were done over British Broadcasting Corporation transmitters, but expanded rapidly and fell under control of the Office of War Information in 1942. The Office of War Information was tasked with creating and distributing propaganda domestically and internationally. They did this through various means such as broadcasts, newspapers, posters, films, and other media. The agency was terminated by President Truman in 1945, and their offices were transferred to the State Department, and most of the responsibilities were transferred to the CIA. It should also be noted that a Voice of America relay station in Thailand was used as a CIA black site referred to as Cat's Eye or Detention Site Green. These overlaps and connections between Voice of America and the CIA should not be glossed over. In 1991, Richard Carlson was personally nominated by President George H.W. Bush to be the U.S. ambassador to the Seychelles, a nation of islands off the eastern coast of Africa. In 1997, he became CEO of King World Public Television, which was later purchased by CBS in 1999 for $2.5 billion. He became the vice chairman of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies which is an organization that is part of the Israel lobby in the United States. It was founded by Clifford May, who was also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Project for the New American Century, and vice chairman of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Now, you're starting to see that it was no mistake Tucker wanted to join the CIA and become a journalist, like father, like son. Tucker Carlson got his start in journalism when he was hired as a fact-checker for Policy Review. This was a publication put out by the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation was founded in 1973 by three men: Paul Weyrich, a political activist and commentator; Edwin Fuellner, an academic who attended London School of Economics, which is a Rothschild-controlled school, and who was also advisor to different government agencies and domestic policy consultant to Reagan; and last but not least, Joseph Coors of the Coors Brewing family. In 1975, Congress investigated the activities of the Korean Central Intelligence Agency in the U.S. Mr. Fuellner had met with the KCIA station chief, Kim Young-hwan, and in the early 90s, the Heritage Foundation started receiving donations from the KCIA. It should also be noted that in 2005, Mr. Fuellner was appointed to a task force on UN reform, which included such people as former CIA Director James Woolsey, with the goal of achieving a more effective United Nations. The task force was also supported by the Council on Foreign Relations. In 1977, Paul Weyrich hired a man named Roger Pearson to write for Policy Review. In 1986, an intelligence agency watchdog publication called the Covert Action Quarterly documented Pearson's connections to James Jesus Angleton, who was the former chief of CIA counterintelligence, as well as Daniel Graham, former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. The Heritage Foundation was largely funded by Joseph Coors through his family wealth, but it also received funding from Chase Manhattan Bank, Pfizer, Dow Chemical, Sears, General Motors, Amoco, and Mobil. David Rockefeller was CEO and chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank at the time. It should also be noted that David's grandfather, John D. Rockefeller, who started the Standard Oil Company, had to break it up due to antitrust laws, and Amoco, as well as Mobil, were once part of the company. John D. Rockefeller also donated the 16 acres of land upon which the United Nations headquarters sits in New York. In David Rockefeller's own memoirs, he is quoted as saying, "Some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it." He also funded and was chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations. A quick little fun fact: before the homosexual political commentator David Brock, founder of Media Matters for America, a leftist propaganda outlet which received funding from George Soros and given office space by alleged pedophile and human trafficker John Podesta, he was on the board of the Heritage Foundation. He supported Hillary Clinton for president twice, and dated James Alefantis, who has been accused of being a pedophile and human trafficker. He is also a friend of Lynn Rothschild. Lynn Rothschild supposedly abhors Trump and fawns over Clinton publicly, yet her and Trump go way back as well. Also, here's a photo of Trump laughing it up with Happy Rockefeller, wife of former Vice President and New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller. It's a great example to show you that these people are all liars and actors. They will fill whatever role they need to fill when they need to fill it. Sometimes that involves swinging to the total opposite side of the false paradigm politically if it's advantageous to the agenda of the elite. Pick your central banking puppet, left or right. It's all controlled, and these people are shameless whores. When Tucker Carlson left his job at Policy Review, he went to work for the Arkansas Democrat Gazette under the tutelage of editor Paul Greenberg. Mr. Greenberg was very well connected, having his pieces published across 1,400 different newspapers within the Tribune Content Agency syndicate at the time. He also won a Pulitzer Prize in 1969 and appeared on major television networks as a political commentator on talk shows such as Charlie Rose. Now, I can't actually prove that Mr. Greenberg was CIA, but when I started to look at a few publications he put out, it made me start to wonder. In one article entitled How to Break the CIA, published on JewishWorldReview.com September 2, 2009, he defends the CIA from what he believes to be unfair persecution. He defends the torture of possibly innocent people as justified in the, quote, War on Terror. When referring to the torture of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, he says, "Are we supposed to be sorry about that and proceed to punish those who uncovered these plans? On what theory? That no good deed for your country should go unpunished?" He also boo-hoos about the morale of the CIA and how investigations might increase their agents' anxiety. In another article by Mr. Greenberg entitled "Hooray for Snooping," published in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette October 23, 2013, he talks about a national conference of editorial writers he attended in Calgary, Alberta in the 70s or 80s. In the article he says that, quote, "That year at Calgary, one solemn resolution proposed that we stop talking to the CIA, since a number of journalists abroad had been assassinated on the pretext that we were all CIA agents, capitalist spies, tools of imperialism, and, well, you know the rest. As if the killers were so lacking in imagination, they couldn't come up with some other excuse to do away with us if they hadn't invented this one. So there we were, an all too solemn convention assembled, First Amendment or no, debating whether we should gag ourselves. I dissented, being an American, and unaccustomed to being told whom I could talk to or not talk to. Memory grows furtive, but I believe the resolution was defeated. That it was ever considered was disgraceful enough. It occurs to some of us that, if the CIA and FBI and NSA had been allowed to talk even to each other before September 11, 2001, that date might not have become another one that will live in infamy. If only big data could have been mined back then the way it is now, the country might have been a lot safer, along with the thousands of innocent victims who found themselves in the Twin Towers that fateful day, and others rushing to their rescue as firefighters and cops, and the troops who were stationed at the Pentagon as airliners were turned into flaming engines of destruction, their passengers and crews wiped out, including those who, like the ones aboard Valiant Flight United 93, were the first to mount a counterattack against the terrorists in this still continuing war. It would seem Mr. Greenberg, a very well-connected columnist, was very sympathetic to the ambitions of the CIA for seemingly no reason. It should also be noted he was Jewish and a Zionist. When Tucker left the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, he went to work for the Weekly Standard news magazine in 1995. It was founded by William Crystal and Fred Barnes. William Crystal is Jewish and the son of Irving Crystal, who's been described as, quote, the godfather of neoconservatism. Irving Crystal was also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and worked for the Congress for Cultural Freedom. The Congress for Cultural Freedom was a group started by a Jewish CIA agent named Mikhail Jocelyn in 1950. It distributed anti-communist propaganda in 35 countries and published over 20 magazines. In 1966, the New York Times ran a series of articles exposing it as a front for the CIA to transfer money to the State Department and the United States Information Agency, the same agency which broadcasted Voice of America, which Tucker's dad was the director of. In the book Finks, How the CIA Tricked the World's Best Writers, author Joel Whitney talks about, quote, how the good versus bad CIA is a false divide, and that the cultural Cold Warriors again and again used anti-communism as a lever to spy relentlessly on leftists, and indeed writers of all political inclinations, and thereby pushed U.S. democracy a little closer to the Soviet model of the surveillance state. He alleges that Crystal was in fact a CIA employee. The man who referred to Irving as the godfather of neoconservatism was a man named Jonah Greenberg, also Jewish and editor-in-chief of the National Review, a semi-monthly magazine. The magazine was founded by William F. Buckley, Jr. and has played a significant role in the development of conservatism in the United States. Like Crystal, Buckley was also outed as a CIA employee in Joel Whitney's book. It should also be noted that Fred Barnes, co-founder of the Weekly Standard, currently moderates a show on Voice of America called Issues in the News. Again, the same program Tucker's father, Richard, was director of. It would seem William Crystal was also a fan of Paul Greenberg, Tucker's first mentor at the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, since he quoted him in an article he published in the Washington Examiner, November 1, 2004, entitled The 9/11 Connection. In the article, he quotes Paul as saying, everything we had thought, assumed, expected in the golden 90s hadn't been so. The surface piece of the 1990s had been bought at a great price. On 9/11, a failure of American leadership was revealed, a failure to look ahead and act forcefully to forestall threats, to do what Bush has called, quote, the hard work of fighting terror and spreading freedom. William's father, Irving, alleged CIA employee, also only had kind words to say about Mr. Greenberg when he wrote the foreword to his 1991 book, Resonant Lives, 50 Figures of Consequence. He said, and I quote, our intellectual and spiritual elites today are, with some notable exemptions, semi-educated at best. This explains why someone like Mr. Greenberg has not received the recognition he deserves. Oh yes, he has won a Pulitzer Prize and other awards, which is nice, but these are tributes to his journalistic talents as a columnist and editorial writer. As a master of the brief, moral essay, he has yet to come into his own. These men all seem to connect to one another in some way, and they all seemingly support the, quote, alleged war on terror while increasing the size of the government in the name of preserving freedom. They protect Israel and promote their agenda while scapegoating Muslims for false flag attacks meant to justify giving more power to their think tanks and intelligence agencies, which answer to nobody except the people lining their pockets. After leaving the Weekly Standard, Tucker then went on to write for New York Magazine, Reader's Digest, Slate, Esquire, The New Republic, The New York Times, The Daily Beast, and The Wall Street Journal. He would also go to work on camera for CNN, PBS, and MSNBC before finally settling into his role at Fox News as the poster boy for conservative values. During those years, he also somehow found time to appear on shows like King of Queens, 30 Rock, and Dancing with the Stars. While he is now on Fox News as arguably their most popular personality, this wasn't his first tango with News Corporation, which owns Fox News. News Corporation, owned by Rupert Murdoch, also owned the Weekly Standard, where Tucker worked under Bill Kristol. News Corporation headquarters is located in none other than the Rockefeller Center complex in New York. Rupert Murdoch is also on the board of Genie Energy, an American energy company located out of New Jersey. Other noteworthy people on the board of Genie Energy include Jacob Rothschild, the head of the Rothschild banking dynasty, and James Woolsey, former director of the CIA, who, if you remember earlier, was also on the UN Reform Task Force in 2005 with Heritage Foundation founder Edwin Fuellner, whose goal was to create a more effective United Nations. The same United Nations which resides on land donated by John D. Rockefeller. In a 2015 article written by Charlie Rose in Vanity Fair, he details a merger between Jacob Rothschild and David Rockefeller. Rothschild bought 37% of shares in Rockefeller Financial Services through his RIT Capital Partners. This is the same Charlie Rose who would have Arkansas columnist Paul Greenberg on his show to talk politics, and the same Paul Greenberg who was held in such high regard by William Kristol and his father Irving. There are so many overlapping connections that can be made that I probably missed dozens, if not more, during my research into the topic. Given these connections to the CIA, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, etc., it's no wonder Tucker Carlson ridicules people who believe that 9/11 was an inside job and calls these people parasites. It's also no wonder Tucker Carlson won't seriously address the Rothschilds on his show, as his boss probably wouldn't be too happy, even though they have so much control and influence. Whenever people bring up legitimate issues, it's his job to mock them so his viewers won't get to the truth of the matter.
Washington, D.C. experienced a mild snowfall last week. Luckily, City Councilman Trayon White was on it. He knows why it happened. Watch this.
It just started snowing out of nowhere this morning, man. Y'all better pay attention to this climate control, man. This climate manipulation. And D.C. keep talking about we're a resilient city. And that's a model based off the Rothschilds controlling the climate to create natural disasters. They can pay for it and own the cities, man. Be careful.
Yep, the Rothschilds control the climate. The Rothschilds, of course, are a wealthy Jewish banking clan. They're included in a great many conspiracy theories, but those theories rarely give them credit for the weather. That's an ambitious new twist. Mark Stein is an author and columnist and a part-time meteorologist, and he joins us tonight. What do you make of it? So this is, by the way, I live here, so you can laugh all you want, but that's actually my city councilman speaking there. The Rothschilds control the weather. Did you know that?
I did actually, Tucker. They bought the weather from God back in 1929 when he had a bit of a liquidity problem after the Wall Street crash. And they keep it in the wine cellars at the Chateau Mouton Rothschild estate in France. And they're able to micro-target the climate. For example, it was light snow in your part of Washington, but I gather in the stairwell of Trayon White's apartment building, he actually had an avalanche just on his floor. That's how micro-targeted the big Jew weather machine is able to be. And by the way, You may think it's a light snowfall, but if you actually examine it, it's actually small pieces of gefilte fish, which is why it doesn't melt. And that's why the Jews control the snowplow business. So they scoop all the gefilte fish in Washington away, and they use it to make Louis Farrakhan Calypso albums, which they put out to discredit Louis Farrakhan from telling the truth about the Synagogue of Satan. It all makes sense.
See, the funny thing is, I don't know if it's funny, it's actually so appalling and shocking that it's hard to, I'm just going to laugh about it. That was what you made me feel better about a city out of control. So then I want to run this by you. Maybe you can make me feel better about this too. There's a new uproar on social media over microaggressions at UC Santa Cruz. The school has assembled a list of microaggressions.
Tucker Carlson seems to be everywhere. He has become the face of the conservative and right-wing movement in the United States, surely due to the incredible amount of connections he has to intelligence agencies and the government. This is why the gatekeepers in the media attempt to give him credibility and publish stories like how he's being spied on by the NSA, or how a seemingly random man confronted him in Montana at a fly fishing shop and insulted him trying to start a confrontation, and it turns out that the man was actually an employee of the Asia Foundation, which was created in 1951 by the CIA as a front organization to distribute propaganda. If you had any doubts before watching this that Tucker Carlson was controlled opposition, I hope the research I presented will put that to bed. Mainstream media is all controlled and it's one big incestuous pit. Don't worship these people as heroes because they will sell you down the river in a heartbeat. Is Tucker Carlson CIA? Well, you can't prove that directly, but once you pour through all of his connections, you would find it incredibly hard not to believe that is the case. About the only thing we're missing at this point is official government documents detailing as much, which I am sure will come out at some point in the future. The CIA has a very long and documented history of infiltrating and controlling the media. Operation Mockingbird is a great example of that. Tucker Carlson is just one of many examples you could make. Remember to always do your own research and turn off the television.
Hey, good to see you after we met briefly at the event in 2008 in Minneapolis for Ron Paul.
Oh, that was fun. I remember that.
But you had to leave early. What happened?
The truther stuff. The truther stuff in Fury. I'll tell you why. I didn't bail on Ron Paul. It's when Jesse Ventura got up and started saying 9/11 was an inside job.
He didn't say that.
Yeah, he did say that.
No, he said that it was curious why the FBI,
Come on.
had Bin Laden on.
Look, I'm the most. I got it. I was there, and but.
So you had to leave because that one.
I was enraged. I was enraged by it. It wasn't controversial. It was still. Let me answer your question.
Sure.
It wasn't controversial. It was stupid. And if there's any evidence that the government was behind 9/11, look, I believe anything if there's evidence, but there isn't any. So knock it off. That's my view.
Okay, but
and I said that to him.
Sure, but one stupid person says something stupid at a Ron Paul event.
I hate that. And by the way, I am open to almost any crackpot theory about anything. It's just on that subject. Come on, you know what I mean? That's too much. That even for me.
So just out of curiosity, then, what's your take on Building 7? Which explanation do you believe?
Come on. This is like...
No, that's a serious question. Which explanation did it?
Which explanation?
There's two explanations. It was either it was pulled or it was isolated pockets of fire in the building that were sort of the towers coming down. That brought it down.
This is a no-win conversation, so I'm not going to continue it. But let me just say one thing. My macro view is the obvious one, which is the buildings came down because a bunch of nutcases flew a plane into them.
Okay, so are you still supporting Ron Paul? So, are you supporting anybody in the race this year?
No, I don't support. I don't even
You're
vote.
An objective
someone.
journalist?
I don't even vote. I'm hardly objective. I'm honest. I'm not objective.
Certainly not afraid to speak your mind.
No, I'm not. No, you can assess my views. They're very clear.
Do you have any
but
message?
I hate that 9/11 crap. Wish they just kicked those people out. I mean,
it was supposed to be the 93rd floor.
Really?
It's important for people whose families still involved to know the truth, whether or not the government was involved or whether it was terrorists, but there's a history of government-sponsored terror throughout the past century.
Exactly.
So what do you mean kick them out?
I don't know, whatever.
Anybody who's a 9/11 truther should be kicked out of the country?
No, of course not. I don't even believe in parking tickets. I mean, please. I just don't. I think that people, before saying something that heavy, ought to present real evidence and not just, it's a coincidence or questions remain, and dumb
think
Things like that.
steel doesn't weaken until 2,400 degrees is evidence that jet fuel couldn't cause a collapse of the tower from being hit near the top.
Except the thing is, it did. So that's the problem.
Steel doesn't melt until 2,400 degrees. It didn't.
I go back to our interventionist policies way back when we first funded Al Qaeda. Back
1978.
Back when they were fighting the Soviets. We gave them a lot of money. The CIA pretty much trained them. I mean that's pretty much enough evidence for me.
That the government brought down the Twin Towers?
You know what, the government was involved in bringing that into our, because they would not be trained, because who trained them? The government trained them. The CIA trained them. Special ops trained them.
All right, I've had this debate so many times. It's not, I don't know. It seems to me that it's kind of beneath like adult discourse, even, really, I guess, and it definitely discredits otherwise good ideas.
I just think that the implications, if the government was involved, the implications are so vast that it should be looked into whether or not it seems ridiculous.
So for family members of the victims that are asking questions and want the evidence that's been withheld by the government released, you would say that they're less than adults somehow for wanting that
I would say
information?
that parasites like you make it much worse for them. That's what I would say.
I'm a parasite now?
Yeah, it's filthy to say things like that with no evidence, and you have none, so you should stop. That's my view.
Welcome back. Millions of people watched the horror of 9/11 right before their very eyes, live on television. 2 planes crashing into the World Trade Center, and less than a couple of hours later, both towers, of course, collapsing. My next guest says that hijackers may not have brought down the towers by themselves. Here to explain his controversial theory, Stephen Jones. He's a professor of physics at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. Professor Jones, thanks for coming on.
Sure, thanks, Tucker.
Well, just sum up this, obviously, your theory, just the one sentence that I just explained in the intro, contradicts what we all think we know about how these towers collapsed. Quickly sum up your explanation for what happened.
Well, I'd like to start with this paper that you referred to. It's available online. What I'm doing, Tucker, is presenting evidence but it's a hypothesis to be tested. That's a big difference from a conclusion, and so I just wanted to clarify that. But to sum up, I've looked at the official reports by FEMA and so on regarding the collapse of these buildings.
Right.
I'd like to look at the collapse of Building 7 in just a minute. It was not even hit by a jet,
okay,
so we should look at that
one. The 2 towers, the explanation has been that the fire inside was so intense that it weakened the structural steel and that each floor collapsed down upon the next in a pancake fashion, and they imploded in on themselves. Is that essentially, I think, what people think?
Yeah, that's basically it, yeah. And so what I've done is to analyze these reports. But I would like to do a little experiment with you, Tucker, if I could. I sent out a video clip of the collapse of Building 7, because most people haven't actually seen that one, and that's the crux of the argument that I'm presenting.
Okay, sum up very quickly the argument for us. You believe there were explosives in the buildings planted by someone, detonated.
Well, yeah.
Is that correct?
In other words, the hypothesis to be tested is there's 2 hypotheses here. One is fire and damage caused all 3 buildings to collapse.
Okay.
The other is that explosives in the buildings may have caused the collapse. And so then we analyze and see which fits the data better. And I've done that in my 25-page paper.
I want to read you a quote from the Deseret Morning News, a paper in Utah from you. I'm quoting now. It is quite plausible that explosives were pre-planted in all 3 buildings and set off after the 2 plane crashes, which were actually a diversion tactic. Muslims are probably not to blame for bringing down the World Trade Center buildings after all. That's, I would think, pretty offensive to a lot of people listening. Do you have any evidence for that? I mean,
well, not to the Muslims, I might say.
Well, that's a good.
I've had a lot of emails.
I'm sure your writings have been greeted with glee in Islamabad and Peshawar and places like that. But for Americans,
well, I haven't received any notes from there, but just good people. I have Muslim friends. Let me read, for example, but I'm not going to let you off the hook. I really want to do this experiment with you.
Well, we don't have a lot of time for experiments, Professor, but if you could just give us one thing to hold on to. How you make these claims or appear to make these claims. Do you have any evidence that there were bombs in the building?
Sure. Let's start with the collapse of Building 7. Can you roll the video clip that I sent to you?
Okay, I'm not sure if we can, but to specify, that is World Trade Center building number 7.
Try it.
Smaller than the other two, was not hit by a plane, of course, yet it collapsed.
Right. It's 47 stories.
That's right.
24 steel columns in the center.
Right.
Trusses asymmetrically supported. Now, I can't see what you're seeing, so
we just see
that?
No, we just see the building, and just so our viewers know, the explanation that I think is conventional is that there was a large tank of diesel fuel stored in the lower level of that, which caught fire, and the resulting fire collapsed the building.
Well, that's basically it. Yeah, but as we read in the FEMA report, it says here, and I put this in my paper, of course, the best hypothesis, which is the only one they looked at, fire, has only a low probability of occurrence. Further investigation, analyses are needed to resolve this issue, and I agree with that.
Okay.
But they admit there's only a low probability. And if you look at the collapse, you see what I've studied is the fall time, the symmetry, the fact that it first dips in the middle, that's called the kink, which is very characteristic, of course, of controlled demolition.
Professor, I am sorry that we are out of time, and I'm not sure that
one other thing I want to mention about...
Okay, if you can hit it, with it quickly.
All right. Okay, here we go. Molten metal in the basements of all 3 buildings.
Right.
And yet all scientists now reasonably agree that the fires were not sufficiently hot to melt the steel. So what is this molten metal? It's a direct evidence for the use of high temperature explosives such as thermite. Thermite produces molten iron as an end product.
Okay.
So we do have... yeah, it's a very short time, but people will read the paper, then I talk about the molten metal, the symmetry of the collapse, and the weaknesses and inadequacies of the fire hypothesis.
Professor, we're going to have to leave it to our viewers who are interested enough to follow up to do just that. We appreciate your coming on, even if I don't understand your theories. We appreciate you trying to explain them. Thanks.
Okay.
The Jews are what the New Testament of the Bible calls the synagogue of Satan, is conquering the world and ushering in the New World Order. The people wearing the Kabbalah string are non-Jews helping the Jews bring in the New World Order. The red string is a symbol to show the Jews that they are helping the Jews usher in the New World Order. The reason they do it is so that the Jews spare them from the mass depopulation that is happening. Not many people are allowed to live in the New World Order. In the Old Testament, the book of Joshua, God was giving the Israelites the land of Canaan. Joshua sent in spies. The Canaanites found out and were searching for the spies. The spies got help from a harlot called Rahab. The Canaanites went to Rahab's house, and she told them she did not see anyone. When they left, Rahab the harlot made a deal with the Israelite spies. Since she helped the spies, she asked that they spare her and her family. The Israelite spies agreed, and Rahab let them down on a red rope on the wall, and the spies escaped safely. The Israelites killed all the Canaanites except Rahab and her family.